Welcome back to the Elevate Podcast, the show for behavioral health leaders who are scaling with purpose and impact. Today's conversation isn't about Google Ads, AI overviews, or business development strategies. However, it's equally, if not more important than these channels, and yet it's often ignored or neglected, considered a low ROI initiative by many executives. But the fact is, nothing could be further from the truth. It's the bedrock of your reputation, your company's DNA. And if done right, it can become a growth amplifier like no other marketing tactic, especially when reaching significant brand awareness and perceived value increases. Because in a space as urgent and personal as behavioral health, your brand is much, much more than just a logo. It's a shortcut to trust and loyalty. Your brand is how people decide if you're safe and legitimate facility that can actually align with their needs in their times of desperation and suffering. And it is just a few of the many things that the prospective patients or the families are considering before picking up the phone to call your facility. Joining us today is Emma Stapleton, a leading brand strategist in the behavioral health space. Emma helps organizations build brands that don't just look good, they drive outcomes commercially, clinically, and emotionally. So in this episode, Emma's going to unpack how to move your brand from decoration to actually become a growth engine. So if you're CEO, CMO, or owner at a facility, get ready to take notes. This one is going to be good. Let's get into it. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Emma Stapleton, who's a director at Mid Partnership and Masters Events, two organizations at the forefront of strategizing, planning, delivering, and democratizing all that's known in trauma, mental health, and well-being. And she's taken insights and expertise to areas where it's needed the most. Drawing on her background, previously leading some of the world's largest consumer brands, Emma brings a unique lens that blends strategy, psychology, and behavioral health science, all rooted in giving brands clarity, credibility, and purpose. This helps leaders position the brand as clinical with clinical and commercial advantages. And I personally had the privilege of experiencing Emma's keynote presentation at the recent Recover.com Marketing Summit. So I'm particularly excited about today's conversation and tapping into her wealth of experience within brand strategies. Emma, welcome to the Elevate Podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Gary. It's a pleasure.
Yes, good seeing you again.
Yeah,
So where are you?
not that long ago, but it does feel like lots happened since we last saw each other.
Yeah. It was, what was it back in, it was a couple of months ago, at least it was at the Ricardo Summit.
Early July from memory. And it was a really fascinating gathering, actually. And it gave me even greater insight into this space, which is still relatively, from a 25-year career. It's only really been in the last 5 years that I've focused in this very important and in my mind urgent space. Yeah.
Amen. So speaking of that, you have a wealth of experiences in brand strategies for so many brands. I just remember the slide with every household name and company that most folks know on. You crafted the strategies behind it. What made you make that shift from working with traditional brands into behavioral health specifically?
I mean, it's incredible grounding working with some of the world's largest consumer brands. And a lot of these organizations don't define their value by the product or the service that they deliver, but actually by the intangible brand equity that they create. So these are brands that understand how to compel how consumers think, feel, act, how they can build rituals and routines into their lives that makes those brands really deep in the hearts and the minds of their consumers. And so, I spent about 20 years in a very privileged position of working with some of the world's largest organizations on how to create and grow brand equity, across multiple markets, into new consumer groups, addressing different need states, where we meet consumers and what they need from a brand. And so it was really great practical understanding of all the tools that are are at our disposal that we can use to harness brand as a strategic driver of impact, not as a marketing tool. And I think that's the fundamental difference. Brand is at the heart of all of those organizations that I used to work with. And I think that's what I'm really to champion and lobby for today. To answer your question, the tipping point for me was around when I had children. And, briefs come to you.
Yeah.
How do we market this sugar to these people, or how do we market? So the products weren't always additive to humanity. They weren't intentionally harmful, but we had all these approaches to be able to deliver against these briefs. And I thought, what if these tools were deployed with greater intentionality and purpose? And it was around that time that I met my now business partner, who is deep in the trauma, mental health, and well-being. And I couldn't believe that, if for most people who are unaware of the space, they maybe will go to a medical provider, and if you're lucky, they might offer some cognitive behavioral therapy. You'll probably get past some SSRIs, but there is so much more to this space. There are so many tools and modalities, so much research. There's so many innovations, the clinical application of psychedelics, and yet largely this category speaks to itself. And so I think it was at that moment I thought, here's a space where this approach, these tools, this way of thinking could really be the catalyst for the kind of change that we need to see and play a big part in the healing of humanity, that I think anybody who's working in this space wants to be contributing to.
Amen. Thank you so much for making that shift. I'm also very purpose driven, and not to talk about my past, but very similar in terms of waking up one day with a 300 person marketing agency, but looking at my portfolio and 20% plus was personal injury lawyers or mortgage and loan companies. I was like, how the heck is that helping anyone? Right? So it just feels so good taking some of those strategies and collaborating with folks such as yourself to say, okay, how do we actually end suffering for many of these folks that are confused, researching and misguided very often, unfortunately, by the rotten apples in this industry. So I think now it's more important than ever to focus on the brand. Speaking of that, why if you were to sum it up, why should the behavioral health executive prioritize a brand enhancement strategy for next year just as much as they usually do with the paid search campaign or the admissions process development? What would be some of the key reasons for that this year?
Yeah, I think my observation from talking to many behavioral health leaders is that they're consumed with the execution, the doing, the delivering. So whether that's in a marketing capacity, which is SEO or paid social, or how am I going to kind of just convert, very tactical, hand to mouth, what am I going to do to get what I need to sustain me? And similarly, in operational context, it becomes, there's often a few people that represent the kind of core philosophy and approach and uniqueness of an organization. And it's, how do I recruit more people in that likeness? And so there's this kind of, they're consumed with the doing. And the purpose around brand is to see it less as something external and more as an organizing idea that can run through everything. So it sits above all of those tactical execution pieces. It should inform everything from recruitment to the experience design, from the moment someone meets you right through to the part that they become part of your alumni and hopefully advocates ongoing. And it should also help guide decisions around marketing spend, channels. At the moment, I feel like there is that big overarching kind of the way we're going to win, and the way we're going to win, not just being the outcome being, the heads that we want beds. Actually, the way we're going to win is by being true to this kind of overarching organizing principle, which is wrapped up the brand. So, that's the business case, and the business case is, in doing so, it's much easier to retain and maintain what it is that makes you effective, it's easier to do all of those executions because you've got clear guardrails. And over time, what that does is create that intangible value, which is brand equity, this thing that keep people coming back for more. And I really kind of,
Yes.
if we want to know what I mean when we say brand equity, let's look at an organization like Coca-Cola. If you look at their balance sheet, they've got huge amounts of infrastructure where they're making brown liquid. They've got huge amounts of investments in sugar, sugar and the future of no sugar drinks. They've kind of got all of these. The single most important aspect of that business in its growth and its sustainability long term is the value of its brand. Is how it makes people think and feel and where it meets them in their moment of need and how well it meets them. So, they'll shift their positioning briefly over time, but ultimately, it's very intuitive to the audience to know when that brand plays a role in their lives. Cinemas, sports games, refresh at the end of the day. And this is the thing in behavioral health. We need to make it. We need to make sure our audience have less heavy lifting to do, and it feels more intrinsic and intuitive. And you're engaging me both rationally and emotionally when I come across your brand. So don't think about brand as a logo. Don't think about it as a badge. Don't think about it as the kind of the plaque on next to the door as you walk. It's much more than that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. That's just going from the typical scenario of behavioral healthcare brands as we see it often to like the Coca-Cola. Anybody who's into marketing, I mean, the case studies, the strategies, the tactics, like 15 people in boardrooms deciphering how can we tap into this market, this audience, this demographic, how can we create emotions with them. Just apply 2% of that into behavioral health, and I mean, you will skyrocket. I love how you say like the consistency in not just tactical, but instead of strategy. Very often when we get solicited by brands here at Elevate, it's very common that they sometimes have 2 or 3 brands that offer the same levels of care. There's no distinguishing unique selling proposition. There's not necessarily a different target audience. It's very much about, okay, we're not sure what works. We are mitigating risk of potential. They're thinking very much about the volatility or legal credibility standpoint. And I'm like, put it all into one and create what you're speaking of, instead of, this is not just about a lead generation campaign. It's so much more than that if you want to get it right. And that the brands, the facilities that win will be the ones who make that decision and double down on that thing. So if I may ask you, and this may be a difficult one to, but what does a strong behavioral health brand look like in your opinion? And if you go beyond the logo, the tagline, everything you said.
Yeah, I think just before we pop on to that, I just want to revisit, because I do want to recognize that Coca-Cola is a very different beast. It's a very frequent purpose, and it's very kind of, often it's a non-conscious, intuitive response. Whereas in this space, it's a deeply invested decision. So I use that example to serve a purpose of talking about long-term brand equity creation, because what that does is it pays back. And it means that, the way you were describing about these behavioral health centers that have kind of got similar offerings, often I'll hear it's talked about in very rational terms. And yet when we're meeting the audience that we want to meet, we're meeting them in a very emotional need state. So brands that will do well in this space will meet those rational needs, but will kind of find a way of meeting the audience where they are. And they'll understand the moment that, so are you talking to the individual that needs the help? Are you talking to the family? Are you talking to the referrer? And you have a way of picking your brand specifically for that moment. But it's not
Gotcha.
just about your brand in the context of the audience you want to reach. Great brands in this space will not need to issue everyone who works or partners with them with a brand manual. It should feel very intuitive. And if you ask people, what is this brand about? You get a version of a consistent answer back from them. Because, if you need a manual to be able to express it, then it's not clear enough what the thing is that you want people to recall, that overarching feeling, that resonance that your brand has with those that you meet, whether that's somebody you want, somebody that you partner with, somebody that you serve, an intermediary, a family member. It's a lasting feeling and impression, and it's not always rational. It is often intuitive and an emotional response that you get first. And so good brands will balance all of these things. And it's an art and a science. There are some really, I'll share at the end of our conversation, a few reflections for our audience to think about. There are some, overarching principles. And then it's also about using design and creativity to speak on that kind of intrinsic level that I'm talking about, to kind of meet people where they are in a way that really resonates.
That's very good. I'll just segue into the next question, okay?
Okay.
So, Emma, tell me what are some of the common branding missteps that you see behavioral health facilities take, and how can they avoid these wrong tactics or strategies that they often apply?
Yeah, I think the main one is that point that I was making about it's seen as a badge or a logo, and it's the thing that we do is we just pop that badge consistently on everything, our letterhead, our website, above the door, on our we wear it with pride on our t-shirts, rather than it being a much bigger thing, and thinking about the kind of hallmarks. So the hallmarks are the kind of big touch points, like your website, like the experiences you walk over the threshold, but also the kind of small marks. It can be in the language that is used when their phone is answered. It can be in a consistent way that the room is presented. It can be, there's so many opportunities for brands. There is no finish line with this work. And I think the more you align your team and everyone that's responsible for delivering that brand and the experience of that brand to the core organizing principle, the easier it is for them to decide how best to show up in their role as a brand ambassador. Because your brand isn't what you say it is, it's what everyone else says it is. So you need everybody who's delivering the brand to be organized around the same thing. So I think that would be the first point. My second is that what I see in this space is lots of organizations end up speaking the language of the category rather than the language of the audience. So when I hear behavioral, recovery.com is a great example. When I hear
A lot of jargon.
lots of jargon, and it's impenetrable to most of the people that you're trying to reach. And it's really hard to learn that. As I came to this space, as I'm sitting here with you now, I'm very conversant for my business. My business partner is really quick to call me out on she would say consultancy jargon that I use. So I know it's very difficult to unlearn a language that feels so familiar. But reminding yourself constantly that for many people who you want to meet, who will form part of your funnel into your organization, this is their first interaction with this space. It's very scary. They don't really understand what's happening to them, never mind their ability to articulate their need or navigate this category, which is honestly, it's so chaotic. And I mean, when I started in this space, I kind of put my consultancy hat on and went into the shoes of a consumer, wrote myself a kind of script of the person I was and the experience I was having to get myself in that emotional need state, and then started to do my research. It's one of the reasons why I was so happy to show up at recovery.com, because we need more aggregation. We need more signposting. We need more simplicity and navigation, because if you go into that field without having someone to hold your hand, without having that language that's used so frequently but is really misunderstood, it's a very scary place to be. And so the point of brand is to take that fear away and to make that moment one of help, of alignment to the state that you're finding your potential customer in, and to make that journey, to take their hand and walk with them, rather than sort of put at the moment. If I think about this category, it's like every behavioral health provider creates their little package and puts that package on the shelf for the audience, and then somebody else does theirs and puts it next to the shelf. And as a consumer, I'm looking at this shelf of all these boxes, and nobody is kind of, all the messages are similar, and they're all at the same volume,
same message, same
their message, maybe slightly different emphasis on one thing versus the other, but ultimately, if it's a graphic equalizer, they're all at the same volume. And it's paralysis, decision paralysis. And so the opportunity for brand is to kind of break that cycle of paralysis, and give people a signpost that you are the right provider for them.
Absolutely. Like some of the biggest brands in the world, like Apple, to make an example, how they create a emotion and the loyalty, like it's second to none, etc. Like having that consistency across storytelling, branding, messaging, and really powerful. It is, however, difficult, to your point, especially if you're running, like, say, a behavioral facility, $100 million revenue, and you have a lot of people, a lot of expensive clinical staff, high overheads, and you're thinking about, that top line. I sit on a couple of boards and work with as a consultant also with smaller facilities, and it's often maybe just lack of clarity, right, from executive level to all the way down, and I recognize it. Listen, as I always say, like, this is damn difficult to crack this especially this industry, because of all the different aspects. And even internally, I always tell, like, the staff, how do you make sure that it's understood? And I think sometimes that what I recommend is identifying a few well-known big companies, brands, especially if you talk about new entry level people that come in to say, like, here's kind of like what we'd like to look like. If ever in doubt, you could kind of look at that. That's how we see yourself, particularly in another industry, just so there's no conflict of interest. You're not copying any competitor. That could be very helpful to get started. Not saying that's the depth, because you've got to go deep. And another thing I often come across is we bring on a client. It's like, can you share with you your brand guidelines and your logo and everything and it's like, what? We don't have that, right? So the getting that, overcoming that first, talking about everything else, it is something that requires a lot of resources, effort, and expertise, like you bring to the table. So with all that said, what would you say? Is there like any emerging trends, or like a facility that you see as a North Star, or somebody who's doing it particularly good, that you say that they are, doing it in the right way? And what are the characteristics of the brand strategy, or how they go about it? Anything comes to mind?
Well, I'm reticent to cite examples specifically in this space, but I will pick up. I think there's a couple of things based on what you've just said. The first is that it is hard to take that pause, to reflect, and to go really deep, in the organization, to find that organizing principle that can be, turned into the brand. But it will make everything that follows a lot more efficient and effective. So I agree, it's not an easy process, but as we all know in this space, nothing that's worth doing is easy. This should maybe
That's true.
Practice a little what we preach in that respect.
So if we're chatting with, like, for instance, yesterday I was talking with the facility with I mentioned a couple of brands, and it was straight into the ROI calculator. And it was like, we need to get the X amount of admits. Let's break down the math backwards, the targeted cost per viable VOB leads, and all the conversion rates. And we're talking about that. But how would you like help, for example, him, the CMO, and myself, help them bridge the gap with the CEO in terms of, like, investing in this, and on the brand, on the storytelling versus like the performance drivers?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of my questions is how clear are they around who their audience actually is? Because you cited an example of Apple there. And
Yeah.
Apple are as clear about who isn't their customer as they are about who is their customer.
Mm,
And again, in this space, because of that hunger, because of that overhead cost, because of that need, I don't think there's there is more need than there is provision in this space. Of that, I'm quite sure. But there isn't the confidence, I think, for people to buy always. And so I think people getting clearer on who is our audience will help them communicate more effectively and increase conversion rather
mm,
than throwing it at the wall and hoping that some of it sticks without really being very targeted in who you
mm,
want. And we're talking at a kind of general level here. I think, after this, I'm always happy to have conversations if whether we host that, but to contextualize this, to have one of those people come on and say, right, let me talk you through where our business is and what we're doing, and it could start to kind of contextualize some of this advice. But honestly, is to not go after everything, because that's what everyone's doing. This is the point about putting the box on the shelf and waiting for customers to pick it up, because it all looks the same and it all serves everyone at the same volume. We need to get more subtle, more nuanced. Apple would not go after somebody who doesn't value the kind of the creativity and the interface experience. And
mm.
I wouldn't have another computer. Apple's got me for life. There's no way that I would have
Yeah.
another interface. I work in this space. I
Yeah.
know exactly what they've done. They highly understand and anticipate my needs. They meet them beautifully and give me no need to look anywhere else for service provision. I also, on road,
Yes.
advocate for Apple. It extends into all the other products and services that I sit around me. And so this is what I want to get to in the behavioral health, is that it doesn't just help in that point of conversion and that immediate ROI that I see the category is so
Mm,
hungry for. It helps with the long-term pipeline development. So it grows that funnel vertically, so that people who have been in your care, that could be the individual themselves, it could be their family around them, it could be their referrer, it could be their wider network, are doing
mm,
that job for you of extending your story and making that story go from the one to the few to the many, and making it really easy in that moment of need for people to recall
mm.
that you're famous for, what it is that you're promising as part of your service delivery. So it's just not a badge. It's
Yeah.
not a name and a badge without meaning. It's the way that you make people feel. It's what the prevailing memory that you want them to have, and it's the ease of them being able to recall it when they themselves have the need or they know somebody else who does.
Mm. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And that's difficult. That's very difficult, right? And folks, it's like, okay, how do you measure it? Is it like a digitally, like if it's a small company, the share of voice online? Is it brand mentions? Is it the amount of citation referring domains? Is it reviews? How do you quantify that and get an ROI on that that's tangible? Like that's kind of like where I get the conversations. I'm like, what if you don't? And what if this doubles because of that? That is like there's so many variables to that. So let me like, because if you were to say, okay, um, let's pretend we're advising a behavioral health facility, 50 million annual budget, annual revenue, so to speak, and with a $5-10 million marketing budget, where would you tell them to, like, okay, where would you tell them to start? What should they be looking at? What should be some of the first steps they assess in terms of optimizing the 2026 brand strategy?
Yeah, and I think this isn't to say that all of the executional aspects that we talked about aren't valid. This is to inform that. So my counsel would be to make sure that you have that overarching organizing principle clearly articulated and housed within a brand. And that
Hmm.
shouldn't be a budget that you revisit every year. This is a different kind of investment to the investment that these
Hmm.
organizations are making month in, month out, year on, year out. This is a moment of reappraisal to understand the way that that behavioral health center is going to win, to identify who they're comparing themselves to and how they compare, and to kind of
Hmm.
create, to be clear about the things that they want to happen. So, what they want people to recall. So it's a moment in time where you invest in the vehicle that will drive growth.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about growth and impact. I am talking about the commercial bit, but I am also talking about clinical outcomes, because a brand that I can align to is something that will go much deeper, and I can advocate for, and I can be proud ambassador of that in the future. And again, this is one of those spaces that we need to make it easier for people to be open and to share, because there is still a lot of taboo around this, and that's part of the need state of the person you need to be aware of. Many of the people that are searching have got some level of shame and embarrassment, and brand has a huge role in being able to help reconcile that. So if you was talking to that person, I would say carve out a decent chunk of that budget to really invest in creating a sustainable platform for growth, which is the brand. And it doesn't just influence your marketing, it should influence your experience design. It should influence your staff, your recruitment, your retention strategy.
Correct.
It should influence your conversations with partners and stakeholders like recovery.com. And you should literally, there isn't a part of you should even, and this is even your finance director should be able to recall that, because when you're having conversations around where to spend and where to save, you should be, thinking about how those opportunities play into the what you're trying to achieve overall. And so to come out of this thinking about brand as being part of the marketing, and actually being as a vehicle for the direction of the organization overall.
Very well said. Very well
it's
said.
It's the most under-leveraged.
The brand is across. It shouldn't be siloed. It should be consistent across all departments, all layers, any communication, every platform, any type of messaging, and more importantly, it was all those messages align, and to what kind of emotions do they drive? Preferably, speaking on comfort and talking about outcomes and ensuring people that there's a better future ahead of them if they engage with your brand. So how can you do that? Because I know you put together a couple of slides with a few, like, let's give the audience a few tactical things they can walk away and look at as we enter 2026 very soon.
Yes. Okay, let's do that then. So if we just skip to the next slide, Gary, let's just think about if I was to say, you asked me how would I provoke or inspire behavioral health leaders to think about brand moving forward. So let's have a look at kind of 5 brand moves, if you like. The first, if we just go to the next slide, is to name your niche. So be known for something. If I'm going to look at those boxes myself, I'm the customer, I'm need. What is the one thing that you want me to remember and recall?
Oof, that's good. That's
your vision rather than someone else's. And if you can't name that, how can you possibly stand out in this very homogenous market? So as a leader in that space, know what it is that you do that sets you apart from everybody else in that space.
I love it. Everybody who's listening, if you want to broadcast your unique one thing, then feel free to put it in the comments. I would love to see some examples.
Yeah.
Second, go ahead, please.
The second thing for me is to simplify the story. If people can't explain you, they won't refer you. Or if the most junior of your staff can't recall what your story is, how can they possibly be a part of delivering that story in the experience? So I often see when people say, what's your, on About Us pages, these really expanded, often AI generated, long, lengthy, they're created for SEO, they're not created for the audience. But really simplify your story and make it easy for the person that's cleaning your facility to understand what that means to how they go up as much as your C-suite or your leaders in the organization. Really get clear and simple.
That is so impactful. Now you got 200 people saying the same thing with passion, and it's very effective.
Yeah, it drives behaviors, drives beliefs, makes people feel good. The third is to design for distinction. So if I've got all of those boxes in front of me, what's the thing that's going to catch my eye? So I'm going to use yoga studios as an example. If I had £1 for every yoga studio that used a lotus flower in its logo, I'd be a very
That's a good one.
So let's not all use some common, like the recovery symbol. Let's not all adopt common language that's shortcut for the space and claim it to be our own. That's not distinctive. So when we think about graphic language, or it could be verbal, how the words that you use, create distinction, stand out in a way that means that you can own your look, your feel, and your voice, not just, again, be part of this kind of blended in category. Because although we think, but it's a shortcut to what we are, a lotus flower, yoga, it is, but it's not going to kind of make you stand out and remembered in that moment.
Won't cut through the noise. It's just, it looks the same. People can't distinguish, or just another brand or another fish in the pond, basically.
Correct. The fourth thing would be to align internally. Quite often in this space, the brand is seen as a logo, and the logo ownership or the brand ownership sits within a very small marketing team, really small marketing team. Rather than it being on every single person in your organization's agenda, you really need to make sure that I talked about this idea of a hallmark and a small mark. The small marks are the things that people might not even clock or acknowledge or recognize, but they are experienced. They go into the subconscious about every moment that you interact with your audience, being an opportunity to cement your brand, your staff as your brand bearers, equip them, include them, make them. It really helps with staff retention and recruitment when you get this right, because people want to be part of the purpose that you've set out for your brand.
Oh man, that's so powerful, because the everything that the marketing landing page to the website to the local listing versus the admissions discharge coordinator, that's making sure that that's consistent, and that's absolutely key, and something that's very often two different stories or two different looks and feels and how it's communicated. So that's a big one, and we all fall victim to it. The other day I was looking, and I was talking to my staff, and that's why I love you so much, Emma, because they call me like an attention to detail Nazi. I'm like, look at this job offer letter. I cannot accept this. What the heck? It looks like it's not aligned with the brand. Well, suddenly we're diminishing that value creation or the messaging. And the same goes for an invoice, or the same goes for any touch point throughout the organization. Does this align with the whole brand? So powerful when you get it right. It's incredible. Just needed to add to that. What's that? What's the last and final nugget you got for our audience today?
So the last one is to really think about amplifying smartly. And this is my call to come out of just seeing tactics as your route to commercial success and growth, and see, and think about how you find who you want. Use platforms like recovery.com, when you'll see the return on investment in brand in spaces like that, where they're aggregating choice. It will really pay back, because you'll be visible where it matters, and you'll be visible in a distinctive and ownable way to help people identify that you are the right partner for them in their moment of need. And so, just they would be my 5. And if you remember only 3 things, it's just on the next slide. If you remember nothing else, please go away from this conversation knowing that brand drives outcomes, commercial and clinical, in this space. That every single moment in what I would call your customer journey, but wherever you meet the person that you're serving or the person that sits around that, every moment is a brand moment. You can always think about how is the brand interacting in them at that moment of arrival, at that moment of departure, at that moment of first conversation on the phone, and be known for something, not known as part of the everything. Because I really do think that if this space doesn't evolve and become more sophisticated in its storytelling, it's really not serving those that need it most. One thing that I'm really keen to say as we wrap this up, Gary, is just with huge thanks, love, and deep appreciation for all that everyone does in this space. I've never worked in a space that's so deep and complex, but also that offers such profound opportunity and healing for humanity. So I'm always happy to be part of these conversations and to help in any way that I can. Just reflect my respect back to this community for everything that it represents and that it does.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for being here, Emma, and sharing all these golden nuggets. And it's so much needed and can make so much impact. And that's why at Elevate, for me, it's an important strategic initiative for finding the right partners who share our values, purpose, vision, and kind of can help each other complementing these strategies. So getting the care for the folks that are suffering. So really, really loved having you today here, and hope to see you at the next Recurder.com Marketing Summit as well, and hopefully also at your summit at Oxford. That one is really interesting. If anybody should be going to Europe and with a therapeutic narrative. So here on a final note, Emma, is there a specific place where people can contact you, or where can they find more information or see about the events and the work you do?
Yeah, I mean, you'll find me on LinkedIn. My email address was on that last slide, if anyone wants to contact me directly. And yeah, I think Transform Trauma Oxford 2026 in September next year. I'll be there in person, and hopefully at the next recovery.com summit. That was a real great space for insight for me. Really appreciated that. So yeah, thanks,
Yes.
Gary. I've really enjoyed the
Thank you
conversation.
so much, Emma. Likewise. I hope to see you both of those places. So let's stay in touch.
Yeah, we'll
Thanks
do.
again.
Sorry.
Okay. Bye.